Hi guys, I am Mary Poplin. I am Los Angeles-based Imagineer Systems product specialist. So I'm here to show you guys a little bit of the new features in Mocha version 3 and talk a little bit about how long we've been in development. And we're really excited to show this stuff to you guys. So let me start with explaining a little bit about our product if you guys aren't aware, and then I will talk a little bit about how we work and the new features in version 3. We've been in development of version 3 for about, I want to say, 18 months. It's our largest release since pretty much Mocha. And we are really excited about some of the new workflow tools that we've made, and I'm sure that you will be as excited as well. So let me stop tripping over my words and we'll continue on. Okay, so we are a planar tracker. Now, that means something very specific. We are not a point tracker. We are not a feature tracker. If you want to know in depth about our software and how it thinks and how it works, please go to our website, www.mocha-pro.com, under videos. We have a video, if you're not sick of hearing my voice yet, we have a video called How Mocha Thinks, and I would be absolutely happy if you guys watch that because it will give you a great idea of exactly how our product thinks and works. You can hit the ground running a lot faster if you watch that. Now let's talk a little bit about what planar tracking is, okay? So in this case, I've tracked this car door through the shot, and you're going to notice something right away. I said we're not a point tracker and we're not a feature tracker. Now that's true. Imagine if you were using a point tracker and a feature tracker, okay, and you were trying to track this shot. There's no good information for a point tracker to hold on to or a feature tracker. Now also, you notice we have debris and stuff flying through this shot. Now that's very bad for ADD sort of trackers like point trackers and feature trackers, because the minute something flies to the scene, they go, "Ooh, what's that?" Okay, and they follow it off the screen. In this case, we look at a pattern of pixels moving relative to one another on the same plane over time. If that sounds like a mouthful, it's, not very hard to explain. So I'm tracking this car door here. Now it's tracking the motion of these pixels, these pixels, these pixels, and these pixels back here. It's measuring the variant motion between those, and it's extrapolating information for the whole car based off that, okay? So in this case, it's also looking at it over time. That means that even though I have this guy and debris flying through the scene, bam, that's kind of fun to watch. Even though I have this guy flying through the scene and hitting the car door and having his reflection go everywhere and having glass come out of the window and having wood fly through the shot, Mocha still hangs onto the car door because that's what Mocha does best. And I'll even turn the track on so you guys can see exactly what the track is doing. It's pretty nice, okay? Pretty nice work. So let's talk about how we do this and how it works, okay? So the first thing I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about how we use Mocha for roto, okay? I'm going to go ahead and open up a project. I'm going to open up this project, which is a shot that a studio called Identity Effects was nice enough to share with us, and it's from Conan the Barbarian. Now, I've clipped off this first frame here because this is, just a template, and I want to get rid of that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim down the shot so that I don't have to look at that anymore. And I'm going to go to my clip tab and I'm going to do some more trimming. Now this has always been in Mocha, but if you ever need to focus on a part of the shot, you just bring your region of interest tool in the clip tab, it's just these yellow dotted lines, down in Mocha, and Mocha will ignore whatever blanking or whatever you have in your shot. Okay, this is also a good place to check and make sure that your aspect ratio and your width and height of your shot, your pixel dimensions, and your frame rate are all exactly where they're supposed to be, because when you take this to your shot, if this information is off in Mocha, it will be off in your the area that you export as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we track and how we use tracking in roto. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use my X-splines. Now I use X-splines. You don't have to use X-splines, but I use X-splines. So I use X-splines, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to track the side of this guy's head. I'm going to track translation, scale, rotation, shear, and perspective, okay? Now let's talk a little bit about what these mean, okay? Translation's pretty obvious, scale is obvious, rotation is obvious, but shear and perspective really mess people up. So let's talk a little bit about what the differences in those are. And I can even use this to illustrate, okay? So let's talk a little bit about shapes and how they move. So translation, obvious, okay? Scale, obvious, okay? Now, you know what else is obvious? Rotation is obvious, and that's right here. Okay, and that's basically, I'm moving the shape to illustrate the concepts here. So also there is shear. Okay, so shear is just movement in X and Y. Okay, So if you have a square becoming a diamond, that's shear. Or if you have a squib on somebody's shirt, that's shear. Now, if you have perspective, perspective is that movement in Z space, okay? So if this shape starts to come out into Z space, like the guy turning his head, that's when we track perspective. So we're going to track all of those, okay? Translation, scale, rotation, shear, and perspective. And speaking of new tools in Mocha for version 3, which I mentioned at the beginning of this demo, this is a new tool in Mocha version 3. This is the transform tool. You can turn it off and on right here. Okay, and this transform tool is basically a way for you to sort of get nice fluid animation on your splines throughout your shot in a more natural way, and also meant to save you time. Now, these are also our thumbnail views. These help you rotoscope, so they look on your current frame, the previous frame, and the next frame. I'm going to turn these off because they kind of get in the way, but you get the idea. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and track this forward. I'm going to call this face rough track because it's really important to name our layers, right? So that we don't pass off files to other people that are called, you know, full of file names like layer 87 and layer 42. You'll end up having somebody come by your desk and read you the riot act. So we're going to go ahead and render. We're going to go ahead and track forward now. So we're just going to track forward. Okay, and Mocha's going to follow this shape. Now let's talk about why we chose the shape that we chose to track. A lot of people will try to do a very fine roto and track at the same time in Mocha. That's not a great way to work in Mocha. The correct way to work in Mocha is to do a rough track for a plane that makes sense for the objects you're trying to track. So in this case, I tracked the guy's side of the head. Now I did that because if you think of your head as a box, right? This is the front plane, this is the side plane of your face, okay? Think about everything in low poly models, like think about the world in terms of low poly models in order to get good areas for Mocha to track. Mocha doesn't have to track solid, hard, single planes like you know, like a tablet or like a phone or something like that. It doesn't need to track hard data like that. It can track organic data as well, as long as it's semi-planar, okay? But it can't track two planes at the same time, so you're not going to track a forearm and the top of the arm at the same time if they're moving differently and get good results out of Mocha. So break everything up, and when you roto, break everything up paper doll style. That means cut people up at the joints, okay? If you cut people up at the joints, you will always, always, always roto a lot faster. You think you're doing more work, but you're not. You're saving yourself time on the back end. So in this case, we've just tracked the side of his head here, and I'm not going to track through the whole shot, but we're going to track from there to there. And I'm going to lock this. I'm going to turn the gear off because that means we're tracking, and I don't want to track anymore. I'm going to turn this visually off so it's not in the way. Now I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to make a finer roto shape. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to make my finer roto shape. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this finer roto shape, and we are going to hook this up to Mocha's rough track. So we're going to call this face fine roto. Okay, and we are going to link this track. Okay, we're going to link the face fine roto to face rough track. So now face rough track will drive my shape. Okay, so I'm going to move a little ways further in the shot, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my lovely transform tool, and I'm going to move my points out in a way that makes sense. Okay. And we're just going to tween between the two shapes based on Mocha's track, and that's how we're going to save ourselves a lot of time in roto. Now, when you roto with Mocha, you should save yourself a third. You'll be using a third of the keyframes that you would normally use, and you should save yourself about half the time. Now, I say that from experience because I've done my share and probably your share and other people's share of roto. So I know from experience that this can save you time. And you can see right here the difference in keyframes. Like, obviously I might have some corrections to do in here to make everything perfect. Well, I don't know, that's sticking on pretty good. But the idea is to save you as many keyframes as possible so you don't end up doing a lot of extra work by hand that you don't need to do when Mocha can do it for you. So let's talk a little bit about some more tools that are new in Mocha. We have a new tool called the Join Layers tool in Mocha, and that's pretty cool. The Join Layers tool basically is this little upside down ladybug head looking tool, and what this does is you can click on this and you can hook points to one another now. So I can hook all of these points. You see how I've got that little hook there? I can hook points to one another and they become parented to that, that shape throughout the scene. So I can make really nice clean roto by parenting those points together. So that is the Join Layers tool. Now let's also talk a little bit about some of the other tools we have. We also have a dope sheet. The dope sheet is new in Mocha version 3. Now that means that I can go into my face rough track and I have a track area. What I can do is I can take my keyframes and I can start to slide them around. Let's say I get a a new head of a shot because the editor sent me like 12 new frames at the head of my shot. No big deal. I can just go ahead and move my keyframes further down. If I reload my shot, hold on one second. I can just move my keyframes further down and I'm fine. Also, if I want to repeat my shape, so I can just Control-C, go to the end of my shot, Control-V, okay, and I can reuse my data as well. So that is the dope sheet. Now, we still have the curve editor. If you want to know where that is, it's right under here under View, Curve Editor, but I recommend that you stay out of here unless you really know what you're doing, because the curve editor allows you to get very deep into your shot and change things on a very molecular level. If you don't know what you're doing, you can really break your shot that way, and even if you do know what you're doing, I recommend that you save your file as a new version before you go poking around in the curve editor. The dope sheet is a lot easier to mess with. Now, and that's where the name of our game is easy, so we like to be easy. Let's talk a little bit about how we export these shapes as well, because that's a question we get a lot. So let's say I have this shape and I want to export this shape. I go to export I go to export shape data, and I can export this shape for After Effects, for Final Cut, for Shake, for Nuke, for Flame, and Combustion. Okay, that is everything that I can do the shapes for, and I can either do for the selected layer or all visible layers or all layers, and I can either copy them through the clipboard or save them and load them into my program. Another thing I can do is I can export this tracking data. So let's say I want to export this, let's say I want to export this corner pin here. If I want to export this corner pin, I just go to Export Tracking Data, and I can export the corner pin for After Effects, for Autodesk, for Avid, for Boris, for Digital Fusion, okay, for Final Cut, for Motion, for Nuke, and for Quantel, and for Shake. So pretty much everything you would want to export our corner pins for, you can, okay? So now that is a breakdown of how we use Roto. The last thing I want to show you guys are some of our new layering tools. So basically, we have new layering tools. You can start to affect layers at the same time, so I can start to change colors and spline colors and everything based on selection, or I can turn their tracks on or off, or their visibility on or off, or I can just basically select everything and I can put it into a group. So we now have groups in our layering system as well, and I can affect groups on a macro level, so I can go ahead and change colors globally for all of my mats, or I can just delete everything all at once. So those are some really rad new tools in Mocha version 3. The other rad new tool we have in Mocha version 3 is Merge Project. So let's say I've split up my shot among several other people. Let's say I had one person do the villain character and I want to see what that looks like. I just go to File, Merge Project, and I bring in that. If I want to load the background to the same project, I just go Merge Background, I open that right up. It'll take a second. And there's my new background right in there. Very, very cool. Okay. And if I want to just sort of sanity check everything, I can turn all my mats on. And I can sanity check everything in my shot and make sure it looks how I want it to look. So merge layers and merge projects is only available in Mocha Pro. So the next thing I want to show you guys is I want to briefly touch on the camera solver again. I know if some of you guys caught the previous version that you know what this is, but if you guys are just tuning in, I'll cover the camera solver very, very briefly. So our camera solver is new in Mocha version 3. Before Mocha version 3, we did not have a camera solver at all. But people asked us and asked us and asked us for a way to take our 2.5D data and make it 3D. So we have answered the call, okay? So when I say that we are a camera solver, okay, what I mean is that we're not really a camera tracker. Kind of like in the same way that we're a planar tracker, not a point and feature tracker, we're a camera solver, not a camera tracker. So camera solver means that we are taking this data here, okay, and we are taking this plane here that we've defined, our 2.5D plane, okay, and we want to be able to see that in 3D space. Now it turns out in order to get a good solve for a shot, you don't really need a full-on camera solve that you would get out of like Buju or Synthesize. Instead, you just need one small track that makes sense to put 3D objects in next to, and you can easily put in things like 3D titles or a 3D object into the scene with no trouble at all. Now, that is not to say that we are meant to replace Bougie or Synthesize. We're not. We're just meant to be a fast alternative. We even play really nice within those programs by helping them out, and I'll show you a little bit about that in just a second. So in this case, I've gone ahead and tracked my background, and that's what my track looks like. It's a very nice, solid track. If you ever want to check your track, you turn your surface and grid tool on. You can see exactly what's going on with your shot. I recommend doing that as often as possible when you're tracking, so that you know right away what your track is doing, because your spline does not indicate what the track is doing. Your spline can move anywhere on the screen and the track won't move. The spline doesn't control the track, it's just where the track is looking. The track drives everything, okay? Now, that's tracked, so I'm going to go to the camera solver. We have a couple of different options in our camera solver. We have auto, pan, tilt, zoom, small parallax, and large parallax. Let's talk a little bit about what each of those things do. So auto does its best to guess what the track is doing, and we'll try to give you a solve based on that. Pan, tilt, zoom is for fixed cameras like this shot that either pan, tilt, or zoom only, and you only need one layer in order to solve them. Small parallax changes are a camera that's far away, looking at an object that's far away, or several objects far away, and the parallax between those two objects is very small. Okay, large parallax is a close camera, looking at objects close to the camera, and the parallax between those two objects will be very large. Okay, so that is what we mean by pan, tilt, zoom, small parallax, and large parallax. Now, these are very easy concepts, and that's really the point. We're trying to get it to where anyone can camera track, okay? So if you didn't think before that you could use a camera solver, now you know you can. So also we have focal lengths if you want to play with them. If you know what your focal length is, you can narrow that down to get better parameters. If you don't know what your focal length is, leave all of them checked. In this case, I'm just going to hit auto and hit solve, okay? Or I'll just hit pan, tilt, zoom and solve for that. Now, I solved for pan, tilt, zoom. It got me a little better results because I know that's what kind of camera it is. And then it's just as simple as exporting my camera data. So in this case, I'm going to export it to After Effects, but you can also export it to FBXs that can be opened in any generic 3D program like Cinema 4D or Maya or anything like that. And we also have FBXs that play really nice with Nuke. In this case, I'm going to do the After Effects, and I'm going to copy to clipboard, okay? And I'm going to go over to After Effects here and load that up. All right. And I'm going to go to Edit, Paste Mocha Camera. I'm going to make sure I'm on the first frame, okay? Just like I do whenever I paste any data into Mocha, I always want to make sure I'm on the first frame. I also want to make sure that my composition settings, again, always match my clip settings. Okay, this is very important. All right. Now, in After Effects, you can see I've dropped in my shot. I have a Mocha camera. I have 4 corners for my surface tool that I made, and a center null point for the center of my my surface that I made. We don't import a point cloud, we import planar data that has nulls attached to it, okay? And then I'll just play through this shot here for you. You can see that the camera is following along nicely and that I have nice 3D references. Now, do you remember earlier when I said that we play really nice with other camera trackers and solvers? Let's say this data back here was really blurry and feature trackers were having a really hard time holding on to it. Okay, what I could then do is I could use my camera solve to just go ahead and put 3D grids into my shot and give something like Bougie or Synthesize better information to track. Or, you know, I could also roto out this lady here, you know, like that's been done down here, and I could roto her out and just hold her out of my camera tracker as well. So Mocha plays really, really nice with camera trackers, and we also give a very decent solve on our own. Now, I also want to show you very quickly one parallax shot, so I'm going to open this project. Alright, so I have this tank shot, okay, and this tank shot's pretty good. Let's talk a little bit about what we've tracked here. We've tracked some BG rocks, and we've tracked some foreground rocks, and this is a large parallax solve, so let's talk a little bit about what this means, okay? These are 2 non-coplanar planes, okay? This is very important. In order to solve any parallax shot, I need 2 non-coplanar planes. So you can see that these aren't on the same planes because obviously the parallax shift between the two is very large. All right, so I've just gone ahead and tracked these. You can see what the tracking data looks like right here. We'll just load up the surface so you can see what they're doing. All right, everything looks really nice. Okay, really nice tracks. So we go to our camera solve. We're going to go to large parallax, okay, and we would hit solve. Now this takes about 4 minutes to solve, so I've already pre-solved this, but I'll show you what it looks like in After Effects. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and I would hit export my camera data, and I would go over to After Effects, and I would go click on my composition, that's my tank shot. Okay, and all I have to do is just, let's play through this shot real quick. Here we go. Let's just play through that shot, and you can see I have my Mocha camera, okay, and I have my In the Army that I've dropped into my shot in 3D space, okay. So let's see what that camera's doing. So that's our 3D parallax camera, and that's my object pasted into my scene. So that is our 3D camera solver. That's new in Mocha version 3. We've been in development for about 18 months. We're so proud of this tool. It's really, really nice. Now, a couple other things I want to show you guys, and the things I'm going to show you are only available in Mocha Pro, but we'll talk about them. One is the lens and insert tool, so lens and insert, and then also the remove tool. So let's go ahead and open up a shot that I'm talking about, so we can show you both the lens and insert at the same time. Basically, let's say you've got to do a screen replacement, okay? Some screen, not all screen replacements are created equal. Basically, some screen replacements are really rough, and let's talk a little bit about this one, because this one's a little rough. So this shot is basically a guy talking to his girlfriend and can't seem to pay attention to her, because he's looking at the football game on the screen above her head. Now, this is not a fun shot to solve, because we've got an animated TV going on up here. We've got some lens warp going on from the guy using a GoPro to record, and it goes completely off screen. So if you wanted to do a 4-corner pin track, you'd be kind of completely out of luck. So let's basically talk a little bit about how we'd solve this. So I'm going to just trim this down to something manageable for this demo. So we're just going to trim to, like, let's see, here. Okay, because that's a nice crisp frame to end on. All right, and we're going to go ahead and solve this shot. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to solve for the lens, because this has some slight warp going on. This warp is something that we need to get rid of. So what we're going to do is we're going to click Locate Lines, and we're going to ask Mocha to locate every line in the shot that it thinks needs to be straight. Now, Mocha is a computer, and it's a little overzealous, so it's going to say everything needs to be straight. So watch. Locate Lines, it looks for every hard edge, and it says that that is a line that needs to be straight. So I hit In for New Line, and I select a new line. I hit In for New Line. In for new line and connect the dots, in for new line, in for new line, and continue to connect the dots. What I'm doing is I'm trying to find as many reference points as possible, okay, in order to get a nice solve. So you see how I've made these lines, and Mocha's drawing a green line through everything, okay? That is the straight line that Mocha's going to try to warp down to get to. So I'm going to go to 1 parameter distortion, because this is a interesting warp. I'm going to go to a focal distance of 8 because it's a GoPro. We have a whole section of our documentation that breaks down exactly how our lens tool works, and everybody reads documentation, right? Well, if you don't read documentation, we have a 2-part, 15-minute video piece breakdown of how our lens tool works, and we'd be happy for you to go over there and to our website at www.mocha-pro.com or imagineersystems.com. They both go to the same place. Go to our video section and watch that. Okay, so I'm going to turn this grid on so that I can start to see what my warp will look like, and I'm going to hit Calibrate. And I feel like Mocha did a pretty good job. That's a very nice slight curve, so that when I put my screen into here, it's not going to feel like putting a square peg in a round hole. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my Track tab. I'm going to turn my grid off, and let's go ahead and start to finish this shot. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to draw a shape not around the TV. Now that's interesting. Why would I do that? Okay, well, I'm drawing this shape, and the reason I'm drawing this shape is because this is a coplanar plane to the TV, so all of the pixels that are moving on this wall are moving relative to this television. So all I have to do is track that television really well. I mean, all I have to do is track this wall really well, and I'll get the information for the television. Another thing I want to do is I want to take my surface tool, and I want to align my surface tool to my television. Now I'm doing this so that I can check the warp that I just solved for. Now you see how the surface tool perfectly lines up to the screen? That is because I have gone ahead and solved the warp. So now this slight curve matches up throughout the shot. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually pull this a little bit outside of the screen, and the reason we're doing that is because this is a demo, and if I were going to do this correctly, I would put a black square here and render that out, and then I would put a TV size square over the top of that so that I could get the screen back in there. But because this is the demo, we're just going to go with an overscan. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and track backwards using perspective, and we're going to watch this surface and make sure it goes off screen. Now we're tracking the wall. The thing about this wall is that in a lot of other programs you call this offset tracking. In Mocha we just call this tracking, and the reason we call this tracking is because this is our intended workflow. We want you guys to look at a shot and think about how to get the best information for the area you're trying to track. You know, don't just think of it in terms of corner pin, think of it in terms of motion, okay? And like what relative motion is happening. Alright, so that is my track. It's looking very nice. Alright, so now all I have to do to solve this shot is I go to my insert clip and I import an insert clip. And because I am shamelessly plugging my software here, I'm just going to load in my background. Okay, and we're going to just go ahead and import this right in. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our insert clip, and this is how the insert clip works. Okay, the insert basically renders out anything that you have in Mocha with the warp that you solved for and motion blur or anything else you want to put on it. We also have some warp that you can do in here that you might want to play with, but in general, what I use this for, I think we have warp here if you want, but in general, what, and you can show the mesh if you want to warp this around, but what I use this for is motion blur to my inserts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn my overlays off, and I'm just simply going to render backwards. And what happens is I'm now going to have a render in my results folder, or I can export the render into something else, but I'll have a render in my results folder that will have its own alpha, okay, and its own motion blur, and I can just drop that right into my comp. So no more going back and forth between a tracking program and a compositing software to get your results done. You just render it out and you're done. So that is our lens and insert tool. The last tool I want to show you guys is kind of our black magic tool. It's as close to black magic as we get, and it's going to be our remove tool. So here's our remove tool. I'm going to go ahead and open up this Wanderlust remove. This is a wire removal that we got from a lovely place called Level 256. Okay, and here's what I've done. I'm going to just go through this really quickly because this is a kind of complicated one, but we don't have much time left. So here, what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've tracked this foreground shape. Okay, I just drew a little small shape here and tracked it. And I used the Uber key to pull this shape out. Now our Uber key is just a ripple edit, so if you'll notice I just pulled those two keyframes out. So now throughout my shot, okay, that should be, excuse me, I pull these two keyframes out, and now throughout my shot, that will affect my edit over time. In this case, I'm just going to pull those back in and not mess with it and turn my Uber key off, my auto key back on. So I have rotoed out this foreground guy. Now the next thing I did was I drew this small shape here, and I drew the shape around my strings, and I tracked that. And this is the one time where you can track and roto at the same time as when you're making garbage mats. But I only have about 5 or 6 keyframes, and you can see that I've come in here and I have made a really broad line around my strings. Now I've done that so that the foreground information that I'm trying to remove doesn't contaminate my background information here, okay? So motion blur or bad roto can contaminate your background shape, so you won't be able to remove your object. The last thing I want to point out is my track for the background. Now, the way I define these foreground shapes is not important, okay? They don't have to be tracked, but this background shape, the water that I'm trying to remove over, must be tracked, and there's a reason for that. Mocha uses that tracking data in order to rebuild this foreground shape by looking at the data around that foreground shape and then rebuilding it pixel by pixel, okay? So you may have heard me say in the past that Mocha can't track animated textures or fractal textures or anything like that. Well, we can't really. We can track like slow-moving smoke and slow-moving water and stuff like that, but we can't track fast-moving pixels that don't move relative to one another. So the reason this background track works is because I'm actually tracking the planar data that is reflected from the tree line onto the water's surface. So there's a lot of ways you can be really creative in using Mocha in order to get good solves. So the last thing I want to touch on is layer order and why it's important. So what I'm doing is I'm telling Mocha that I want to remove this wire and that I want this body shape held out of my entire remove, and that I want it to look in this background shape to replace this foreground shape. So Mocha treats everything at the top of the layer pile as closest to the camera, and everything at the bottom of the layer pile is furthest from the camera. That means that Mocha will hold out top layers from bottom layers throughout the scene. That means that you always have your own holdout mats if you work foreground to background. Okay? Really important workflow. It'll really save you time. So Now let's just go ahead and remove this object. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Remove tab. And then I've told you how we broke this shot down. And I'm going to zoom in here so you guys can really see what's going on. Excuse me. Zoom in here really big so you guys can see what's going on. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and render forward. So I'm going to go ahead and go to like here or so that because we're almost out of time. And I'm going to go ahead and render forward. And what it's going to do is Mocha's going to remove this shape by looking in this background shape. And the cool thing is that Mocha will use the same compression and the same noise pattern that's going on in the shot because it has more than one frame to pull from. Now, if you only have one clean plate to use, I'm going to tell you, you're going to probably need to degrain and regrain your shot in order to get the best results. But if you're pulling from multiple keyframes, you should be able to get a nice match so that you don't have to worry about that sort of artifact problem that you normally have to worry about with other programs. So that is Mocha version 3. These are our awesome new tools, and we are so excited to share this with you. I am Mary Poplin. I am Imagineer Systems, Los Angeles-based product specialist. If you have any questions at all, you may email me at maryp@imagineersystems.com. We would love to hear from you. And please, please, please visit our site at www.mocha-pro.com. Watch our videos, download a trial of our software. We really don't think you're going to be disappointed. We're really, really happy about version 3. Thanks so much, and have a great day, okay? And we're going to answer questions.